I feel like I'm sitting in history class, learning so much. It makes me feel so proud to be a part of the state and a part of the commission, too. Next, we have another historian, Jerry Nelson. Hello, my name is Jerry Nelson. I'm a white person with bald head, glasses, black shirt, black pants, and gray shoes. No laces. I'm always teasing people with that. So now, Bob really started off well, and I was thinking, I'm only supposed to speak for 5 to 8 minutes, but I have so much to share. However, I already did share the HISA history. That's the Hearing Impaired Services Act, where Bob mentioned they passed that study. The legislature waited for the study results from 1977 to 1980, and they passed the Hearing Impaired Services Act, which set up regional service centers. That's where I was involved. It's a very long story. I did tell that story, and it was filmed by the commission. Maybe you can ask them to see that video. Go through Anne, who worked with me on that. Now, as I was saying, after I finished that, I went back to college, and when I came back, I had so many ideas. Remember, Bob had mentioned MFBHS? The deaf community signed it like this. Do you remember that? That was the sign for it. Anyway, I became the executive director in March 1983. And when I joined the organization, I tried to envision what I wanted to accomplish. Number one was to continue advocacy work. And so we did that. After about 1 year, I really started getting invested, went to the legislature, and tried to help others with this effort. There was a lawyer working with legal aid for the deaf, Kurt Micah, who really had a wonderful heart. So we worked with them and worked with others within the deaf community. There's so many things we did during that time. We went to rallies for education. We did so many things. Really, I just have to pick a few stories to share with you all this evening. Okay. As I was mentioning, we went to the legislature frequently and for a number of different bills, wanting to make sure that deaf people's rights were being protected. There was one bill that we knew we had to introduce, and the story behind that was a deaf man was arrested and put into jail for 4 days with no interpreting service, no communication. Then they said, oops, you can go. He had no understanding of why he was put in jail and was shocked. Now, he does have this look about him that makes people wary. Yes, but that's no reason for not providing services. So we fought at the legislature tooth and nail and convinced the legislature to pass a law requiring that for any time a deaf person was arrested, they must provide interpreting services immediately. That law was passed, which was great, but we don't know if it was actually followed in practice. We should follow up and see if that law is actually still on the books today. So that's one story. Another one that I am very proud of. So it was then called MRS, the Minnesota Relay Service. Now remember, we were doing all of this before 1992 when the ADA was passed, requiring relay access for all deaf people. This was 1985 that we were doing this, going to legislature, and it took us 3 years. We would come back year after year, session after session, pushing this. I had one intern who was fabulous. Some of you may know him, Pat Wolf. He was a student at St. Thomas College and a volunteer intern majoring in political science. I recruited him to work with us for 3 years, and by the third year, he was so experienced, he would focus on the legislature while I focused on office work. He called me one day through my secretary. There were no TTYs at this time. We didn't have pagers, so he called me through my secretary and he asked me to come because of a problem. Ah, okay, I said, and I dropped everything and raced to the Capitol. I arrived and was approached by a woman who was sponsoring the bill along with Pat Wolf and three men from AT&T, the telephone company. And they came and said, California already has a relay service, that AT&T was providing that service in California. They said Minnesota should not take this on, as the bill said, that we should let the telephone companies handle it. And I said, no, I wrote the bill to say who would provide relay services specifically, a deaf community organization, not the telephone company. And so I pushed for that anyway. So that was the language they had taken issue with, language that had championed the deaf community. And so I said, okay, well, will you hire deaf and hard of hearing people if you establish a relay service here in Minnesota? Will you hire deaf people? And they said, no, deaf people can't work there. And I looked at the author of the bill and said, see, they are not the right group. The author agreed, dismissed the men from AT&T, went back to the House floor for voting. 3 hours later, the vote had passed. Ooh, it was not easy, but we made it. And after that, guess who was appointed to run the relay service? An organization called DEAF, Deaf. And who founded DEAF? Madsy. Now, there are some lessons learned or takeaways from my time as executive director. As I mentioned, I was often at the Capitol sitting in on committees, providing testimony, watching their discussions. The legislature knew me. They knew my face. They would greet me by name. We would sit and talk. And one day we were at a legislative hearing. I was providing testimony, and one of the committee members stops me and says, Jerry, I don't mean to offend you, and we love hearing from you. You are an advocate, yes, but we never hear or see deaf people testify at the legislature. And that stopped me in my tracks and made me realize that, yeah, they were right. From that point on, I stopped testifying. Instead, what I did when there was an issue, I would find someone with lived experience on that topic and bring them to testify. Many who I approached originally wanted nothing to do with it, but I offered coaching and training, mock hearings, and made sure that they were prepared. And as a result, we had many bills pass because we brought real lived experience to the legislature. No. One last thing that really warms my heart. Last year I moved back to Minnesota. I left back in 1988, and it's been a long time since I've been back here, but finally I moved back last year. I was talking with Alicia, who is the legislative person for the commission. And we were talking about how finally the legislature passed a bill that requires insurance companies to pay for hearing aids. And I said, "What?" 40 years ago, I fought tooth and nail every year, and insurance companies were the ones who were there to push back every time. They have a very, very powerful lobby. They pushed back and we lost time and time again. Now Alicia tells me it's finally passed. That's so inspiring. That was 40 years ago. That just goes to show you the importance of the advocacy that you all have done. Now, in closing, really with all of my experience, people, now that I've moved back, people who know me have been coming to me with ideas of things I can do. And though I'm retired, my plate is already full doing things for many other organizations. I'm on DSA, Deaf Seniors of America board, among others. I'm on the finance committee with NAD and all sorts of things. But I also try to have some time just to veg out and relax because I have worked so hard for so many years, but it has been well worth it. Thank you.